Aubrey Lane stood frozen in the doorway of the penthouse she once considered home, the lights of Central Park West glittering behind her like a cruel mockery of the life she thought she had. Snowflakes clung to her coat as if even the winter refused to let her go. Grant Mercer didn't look at her when he spoke. He didn't have to. His words were knives, sharp and deliberate. "You have 10 minutes to pack whatever fits in that little bag of yours," he said, swirling a glass of scotch like he was settling a business deal instead of ending a marriage. "And Aubrey, you're leaving with nothing. Not a dollar, not a piece of furniture, not even the clothes I bought." The woman standing beside him, Chloe, his 24-year-old assistant, and the reason her marriage had collapsed, smirked from behind her flawless makeup. It was the smirk that shattered Aubrey more than the words. Because Chloe wasn't gloating, she was confident. She knew something Aubrey didn't. Aubrey's breath shook. "Grant, He finally looked at her, eyes cold as glass. "Aubrey, you're not worth a conversation. The court date is set. My lawyers will handle the rest. You're irrelevant now." Irrelevant. A word meant to erase her entire existence. Aubrey clutched the strap of her worn leather bag, the only thing she owned that Grant couldn't claim. Her mind raced 8 years of sacrifice. Late nights supporting his company, giving up promotions so he could chase his empire. She had built this life with him, brick by brick, and he was discarding her like an outdated contract. As she stepped out into the hallway, the door slammed behind her with a finality that echoed down the marble corridor. Her world had collapsed in seconds. She didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know Grant had set her up for something far darker than divorce. She didn't know someone powerful had been watching everything. And she definitely didn't know that the man about to walk into her court hearing would change the fate of every person in that penthouse tonight. And when he walked in, Grant's face turned white. And ever was. Aubrey Lane had always believed that if you loved hard enough, worked steadily enough, and stayed loyal through the storms, life would eventually repay you. It was a belief shaped by years of surviving on little more than determination and the memory of a mother she lost too young. She had been raised in a quiet Virginia town where secondhand bookstores and long bus rides were a normal part of growing up. Nothing about her childhood suggested she would one day stand in a penthouse overlooking Central Park West. What brought her to Manhattan wasn't luck, it was grit. She graduated early, worked 2 jobs through college, interned without pay, and clawed her way into a junior financial analyst position in Midtown Manhattan. She was the kind of woman who kept her phone screen cracked because she always prioritized bills over upgrades, who brought homemade lunches while others ordered takeout. Her ambition was real, but so was her practicality. Then she met Grant Mercer. Back then, Grant wasn't the CEO of Mercer Tech, or the polished man who now wore tailored suits and drank expensive scotch. He was an ambitious programmer, with more ideas than investors, a man who told Aubrey she was the only person who saw him. He had chased her with sincerity, late-night phone calls, long subway rides just to walk her home, promises whispered on rooftops about building a future together. And Aubrey believed him. When he asked her to marry him, she didn't hesitate. She moved into his small apartment, typed out business proposals for him after work, attended every pitch meeting, and used her own savings to help fund the early days of Mercer Tech. She gave up a major promotion because Grant insisted they needed someone stable at home while he took risks for their future. She never complained. If he succeeded, then they succeeded, at least that's what she told herself. But the higher Mercer Tech climbed, the more invisible Aubrey became. Grant started traveling without telling her. He started calling her too emotional, too cautious, and later, too boring. At first it was subtle, then it became a pattern. Soon, she wasn't his partner, she was background noise. His family didn't help. The Mercers, old money from Connecticut, saw Aubrey as a charity case dressed in department store shoes. At family dinners, they asked pointed questions about her limited upbringing. Grant never defended her, he laughed along. Still, Aubrey tried. She tried because marriage meant effort, patience, and fighting for the life you promised to build. She tried because she believed people changed under pressure, not because they no longer cared. But now, standing alone with only a single bag to her name, she finally saw the truth. Grant didn't see her anymore. Hadn't seen her in years. Aubrey's life had become a series of sacrifices no one remembered. A love story only she was trying to keep alive. And the worst part was the humiliation. Not the eviction. not being told she was worthless, but the realization that the man she loved had been preparing to erase her long before tonight. She replayed their last months like broken film strips, Grant's sudden late meetings, the faint perfume not hers lingering on his shirts, the new credit card charges she wasn't allowed to question, the way he flinched when she touched his arm. She knew now that she had been living with a stranger who saw her loyalty as weakness, a stranger who had been quietly plotting something far darker than divorce. As she walked down the dim hallway, her breath trembling in the cold, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into a story already written for her. She just didn't know the ending. Not yet, but soon, someone else would enter her life and rewrite everything she thought she had lost. The Manhattan night had a way of swallowing people whole, especially those who didn't belong. Aubrey Lane stepped out onto the icy sidewalk of Central Park West, her worn leather bag pressed against her chest like a shield. Snowflakes, sharp as tiny needles, drifted through the streetlights and landed on her cheeks. Her breath fogged in the freezing air, and her fingers trembled as she tried to tighten her scarf. It didn't help. Nothing could. Behind her, the penthouse door slammed, sealing her out of a life she had spent 8 years building. Grant's security system beeped, locking the world she once lived in, locking her out as if she were a stranger who had wandered too close. A taxi passed her without slowing. Then another. It wasn't uncommon. No one stopped at night for someone who looked desperate. And tonight, Aubrey looked exactly like that, a woman standing on a sidewalk with everything she owned shoved into a single bag. She started walking aimlessly, the sound of her boots crunching through the thin layer of snow. Manhattan glittered around her like the world's most expensive snow globe, a place that dazzled outsiders but suffocated those who couldn't keep up. She had once felt proud to live here, proud to be part of it. Now, each skyscraper felt like a towering reminder of how small she truly was. She tried to call a friend from work, someone she thought she could depend on. The call went to voicemail. She tried another, then another. Same result. Manhattan friendships were built on convenience, not loyalty. And she had been replaced the moment her last name stopped benefiting anyone. Aubrey turned toward Columbus Circle, hugging herself against the wind that cut straight through her coat. Her mind kept replaying Grant's words. "You're leaving with nothing." How easily he said it. How confidently. And then, something even colder slid into her memory, the faint smirk Chloe gave her. It wasn't a smirk of triumph. It was a smirk of certainty. A smirk that said, "We already won." That thought twisted in Aubrey's chest as she reached a bus stop and sank down onto the bench. Her legs felt weak, her heartbeat heavy. She pulled out her phone, hoping to check her bank account. Perhaps she could book a cheap room for the night. The screen flashed red. Account frozen. Her stomach dropped. She tried another card. Declined. Another. Also declined. Snow blurred her vision. Or maybe it was her tears. She couldn't tell. She wiped her eyes, hands shaking uncontrollably. Grant hadn't just kicked her out. He had planned this, prepared it. Every detail. Every exit. He wanted her helpless. She stared at the city skyline glowing in the distance, a breathtaking portrait of success and power. Somewhere inside those buildings, thousands of people were sipping warm drinks, sitting in cozy apartments, wrapped in blankets. Meanwhile, Aubrey sat on a freezing metal bench like she'd never belonged anywhere. She leaned back, exhaling shakily. Her life had been reduced to this moment alone, broke and cornered. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. For a heartbeat, she almost didn't answer. But something instinct, desperation, fate made her swipe. A voice, calm and distinctly formal, spoke on the other end. "Miss Lane," the voice said, "you need to leave that bus stop. Someone is coming for you." Aubrey's breath hitched. "Who is this?" she whispered. The voice didn't answer her question. Instead, he said something far more terrifying. "They know you found out more than you should. Move. Now." Aubrey shot to her feet, heart pounding. Someone? Coming for her? Why? She looked around the empty street, and that's when she saw headlights turning the corner, slow, deliberate, creeping toward her. Grant Mercer stepped onto the stage of the Mercer Tech Winter Gala as though he owned not only the company, but the entire city shimmering behind the ballroom's glass walls. The chandeliers dripped light like liquid gold, cameras flashed, and the guests, investors, Board members, socialites, leaned forward with admiration that bordered on worship. Grant thrived in this kind of room. It fed him. And tonight, he wasn't alone. Chloe Devereaux stood at his side, wrapped in a crimson silk dress that clung to her like a second skin. She looked younger than ever, her smile bright and hollow, the exact kind Grant preferred. The crowd whispered behind manicured hands, but no one dared judge him. He was the rising star of the tech world, the man with billions in valuation and limitless arrogance. And if he wanted to bring a mistress to a gala hosted in his wife's absence, who would stop him? A server in a white jacket passed with a tray of champagne. Grant snatched a glass, lifted it halfway, then stopped when he noticed a group of senior board members watching him expectantly. He placed his hand on Chloe's back low, possessive. "Smile wider," he muttered through his teeth. She obeyed instantly. The room erupted in applause as he began his speech. "Mercer Tech has entered a new chapter," Grant declared, confidence dripping from every syllable. A chapter defined by innovation, ambition, and the right leadership. He paused, letting the word leadership hover like bait. Behind the applause, Chloe whispered, "They love you. They'll follow every step you make." Grant's smile sharpened. "They will when they see what I do next." Chloe tilted her head. "Something big?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for her to follow him off stage, weaving through groups of investors who reached out to shake his hand. He brushed them aside. He wanted a private moment, a moment to gloat. When they reached a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows, he finally spoke. "Aubrey's out of the picture," he said, with a cold finality, sipping his champagne. "By the end of next week, she won't exist in any legal or financial capacity. The divorce will bankrupt her." Chloe's lips curled. "And no one suspects?" Grant chuckled. "They think she left, that she couldn't handle my success. Poor little Aubrey, overwhelmed by the big city." He leaned in closer. "The accounts are frozen, her name's tied to the wrong transactions, and when the audit lands, she'll take the fall, not me." Chloe blinked, momentarily startled. "Isn't that risky?" "Not for me," Grant said simply. "She's too soft, too trusting. She'll crumble the moment she's questioned." Take 7. But Chloe wasn't entirely convinced. Her eyes drifted toward a group of executives whispering among themselves. Something in their posture made her uneasy. "Are you sure the board will back you?" she asked. Grant's jaw tightened. "They always do." But she caught the flicker of tension behind his eyes. He lowered his voice. "There's one thing I need before the board signs over the expansion. I need Aubrey's signature on the final asset transfer. Once that's done, everything's secure." "Lessened it." Chloe stiffened. "But she's gone." "She won't be hard to find," Grant said. "Not with the people I've hired. Someone's probably watching her already." Chloe's blood ran cold. She hadn't realized how far Grant had gone, how ruthless he truly was. And then, as if fate wanted to puncture the moment, a senior board member approached. His smile was tight, overly polite. "Grant," the man said, "we need to discuss something. Right now." Grant's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" The board member hesitated. "It's about Aubrey." Grant felt his stomach drop. The next morning, Aubrey Lane sat in the waiting room of Harlow and Finch, one of Manhattan's most well-known law firms, a place she never imagined she would enter as anything other than a financial analyst delivering quarterly reports. The glass walls, the marble floors, the framed degrees from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they all seemed to close in on her like judgmental eyes. She tightened her grip on her worn leather bag, the only thing grounding her in the moment. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy elevator doors across the hallway. Swollen eyes, messy hair, a woman who had slept less than 3 hours on a lumpy sofa in a borrowed apartment. She looked like someone who did not belong in a building like this. "Mrs. Mercer?" A crisp voice called out. Aubrey flinched. The title felt like a slap now. The assistant led her into a conference room larger than her first apartment. A long oak table stretched from wall to wall, surrounded by leather chairs that looked more expensive than her entire wardrobe. But what caught her attention wasn't the table. It was Grant. He was already there, fresh suit, perfect hair, calm like he hadn't thrown her out into the cold the night before. Sitting beside him were 2 attorneys in immaculate tailored suits, flipping through thick folders labeled Mercer v. Lane. Her chest tightened. Grant didn't stand when she entered. He didn't greet her. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he kept his eyes on his phone, scrolling mindlessly. The older attorney nodded at her. "Mrs. Lane." "Actually," Grant interrupted, "it's soon to be Miss Lane. Let's not pretend this is something it isn't." Her stomach twisted. The attorney cleared his throat. "As we stated on the phone, this meeting is to finalize the dissolution terms. Mercer Tech is preparing for a major expansion, and swift resolution is in the best interest of all parties." Aubrey barely found her voice. I don't understand why everything is moving so fast." Grant finally looked at her, cold amusement flickering in his eyes. "Aubrey, you're dragging this out. The board needs certainty. I need certainty. Sign the papers and move on." End quote. The attorney slid a stack of documents toward her. "These outline the division of assets. Mr. Mercer retains property, investments, and all business interests. You will receive a one-time financial settlement of . He turned the page. Aubrey leaned in. Her breath caught. $10,000. She felt the blood drain from her face. 10,000? After 8 years? After everything I put into the company? Grant gave a lazy shrug. "You didn't invest. You supported." "There's a difference." "That's not true," she whispered. "I used my savings. And I repaid you," he cut in, "with rent-free living for 8 years. Don't rewrite history." She gripped the edge of the table. "This is absurd. You're freezing my accounts, locking me out of our home, pushing this through like I'm some stranger." Grant's smile was small, calculated. "You are a stranger, Aubrey." Her heart cracked a little at the edges. The younger attorney slid another folder forward. "There is one more matter. Due to suspicious financial activity linked to accounts under your name, the firm advises you not to contest this settlement. A deeper investigation may complicate things." Aubrey stared at him. "What financial activity?" The attorneys didn't answer. Grant didn't look concerned. He looked confident, like he knew exactly what they were talking about, like he had planned it. Aubrey's hands trembled. "I didn't do anything. I never touched those accounts. Thank you for watching." Grant folded his hands neatly on the table. "Then sign, and the investigation won't escalate." Her pulse hummed in her ears. It wasn't a divorce. It was entrapment. She looked down at the pen they pushed toward her. A Mont Blanc, Grant's favorite brand. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She wasn't supposed to sign her freedom. She was supposed to sign her own destruction. Aubrey swallowed hard, tears threatening. Then the door suddenly opened. A man stepped inside. Not someone she recognized, but someone who looked like he knew exactly who she was, and who Grant was. Aubrey Lane didn't remember how she made it back to the tiny sublet apartment on the Upper West Side. She didn't remember walking out of the law firm or the way the attorneys stared at her like a criminal who hadn't yet realized her own guilt. She only remembered the moment the door of the borrowed apartment shut behind her, and the deafening silence that followed. She stood in the dark for several seconds, her breath uneven, her fingers still trembling from the meeting. The city hummed beyond the windows, car horns, distant sirens, the steady rhythm of a place that didn't stop for anyone's heartbreak, not even hers. Her knees buckled before she could catch herself, and she dropped onto the sagging sofa. The springs groaned under her weight, a pathetic contrast to the plush velvet furniture she had once lived with. She pressed both hands to her face and exhaled a shaky, broken sound. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her reputation was under quiet, calculated attack. Her marriage was over, and someone with power was trying to frame her. The weight of it crashed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers. A part of her still hoped for a miracle. Maybe there was one friend left, one person who would pick up, one person who didn't believe Grant's carefully crafted lies. She called Marissa, her closest coworker. No answer. She tried Jen from HR. Voicemail. She tried her old college roommate. Call failed. Aubrey stared at her shaking hands. "I'm alone," she whispered. Saying it made it real, made it sink deeper. The apartment's single lamp flickered, casting a dull gold glow over the cracked coffee table. She noticed a stack of mail someone had slid under the door earlier. With a hollow feeling, she reached for it. Bills. Overdue notices. A letter from Grant's attorney demanding she cease unauthorized access to marital accounts. Unauthorized access. To her own money. Her chest tightened again. She curled forward, pulling her knees to her chest as a sob tore free. She had worked so hard to get here. She had sacrificed years of her life for a man who was now treating her as disposable, worse, dangerous. She cried until her throat burned, until her tears dried on her cheeks, until the reality became too big to outrun. When she finally lifted her head, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the old refrigerator. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve and reached for her laptop. It was slow, outdated, and missing 2 keys, but it worked. She typed her name into the search bar. A headline appeared: Mercer Tech CEO's wife under investigation for financial irregularities. Okay. Aubrey covered her mouth, a sickening rush of fear rolling through her stomach. Grant had moved faster than she realized. He wasn't just trapping her legally, he was poisoning her publicly. She clicked the article. Sources close to the situation report that Mrs. Aubrey Lane may have been involved in unauthorized transfers connected to Mercer Tech's development fund. She slammed the laptop shut. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. This wasn't a divorce. This was a strategic dismantling, a planned destruction of her identity, her credibility, her entire life. The phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown number. Her pulse jumped. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but something in her gut urged her to answer. She pressed the green button. Miss Lane, the same calm voice from earlier said, "You need to listen carefully." She swallowed hard. "Who are you?" "We don't have time for that." The voice remained steady. "The people framing you aren't done, and you're in more danger than you realize." Her entire body froze. "Danger?" she whispered. A beat of silence. Then the voice said something that made every hair on her body rise. "They're coming tonight." Aubrey Lane's fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles turned white. The mysterious voice on the other end was unnervingly calm, as if warning her about a late package delivery rather than something far more sinister. "Who's coming?" she whispered, barely able to push the words out. I don't understand." "You don't need to understand," the voice replied. "You just need to move. Now." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Are you with Grant? Is this another trap?" A sigh, not impatient, almost sympathetic. "Miss Lane, if I were working for Grant Mercer, I wouldn't be calling you. I'd be at your door." Something in the way he said it made her blood run cold. "I can't just leave," she stammered. "This is the only place I have." "That's exactly why they know where to find you." Aubrey's breath hitched. She pushed aside the thin curtain and peeked out the small window overlooking the street. A dark SUV sat idling at the curb, engine humming. 2 figures were inside. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. They were just watching. Her entire body tensed. "Why would they come after me?" she whispered. There was a rustle of papers on the line before the man answered. "Grant Mercer is laundering money through shell accounts," he said matter-of-factly, "and the transactions he doesn't want traced, he put under your name." Aubrey felt the room tilt. "That can't be true," she whispered. He couldn't. He already did." Her legs felt like water. The man continued, "And now that the audit is starting, the best way to keep his hands clean is to make sure you disappear or look guilty enough that your testimony carries no weight." If Aubrey staggered backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the rug. "Disappear? Are you saying he would?" "I'm saying," the voice interrupted gently, "that staying in that apartment tonight is the worst decision you could make." Her throat tightened. "Then what do I do?" For a moment, all she heard was static. Then, "Pack a bag. Only essentials. Nothing traceable." Her gaze darted to the worn leather bag she'd carried from the penthouse, still lying pathetically on the sofa. "Where am I supposed to go?" "There's a black car at the corner," the voice replied. "Not the SUV. A sedan. It's unmarked. The driver will take you somewhere safe." Aubrey's pulse quickened. "Why would I trust you? I don't even know who you are." There was a pause long enough to fill the room with dread. Then the voice spoke softly. "You don't have to trust me, but you should trust what you saw tonight. The frozen accounts, the article, the attorneys pushing you to sign, the SUV outside your building. Do those feel like coincidences?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because deep down, beneath the shock, beneath the heartbreak, Aubrey knew the truth. Grant had planned everything. He was going to let her take the fall. And if she disappeared, no one would ask questions. The voice added quietly, "I'm helping you because someone asked me to. Someone who has more stake in your survival than you realize." Aubrey froze. Who? You'll know soon. The voice softened slightly. But only if you leave. Right now. A sharp knock jolted through the apartment door. Aubrey's breath caught. Another knock. Harder. Miss Lane, the voice said urgently, you have 60 seconds. Go. She dropped the phone, grabbed her bag, and ran toward the back exit. Behind her, the knocking became pounding. Someone was trying to break in. Aubrey yanked open the door to the alleyway, cold wind slashing across her face as she slipped into the darkness, just as a voice shouted from inside her apartment. She's gone. The alleyway behind the apartment building was narrow and slick with melting snow, the kind of place most New Yorkers hurried past without looking. Aubrey Lane sprinted through it, her lungs burning, her breath visible in sharp bursts. Behind her, voices echoed shouts, footsteps, the unmistakable sound of someone kicking down a fragile door. She didn't look back. She couldn't. At the end of the alley, a black sedan idled with its headlights off. The engine gave a low rumble, like it was holding its breath with her. Aubrey hesitated only a second before yanking open the back door and stumbling inside. The driver, a clean-cut man with sharp eyes and a jaw that could have been carved from stone, didn't turn around. He simply shifted the car into gear. "Seatbelt," he said. His tone wasn't rude. It was efficient, controlled like someone who made a living navigating chaos. Aubrey clicked the belt into place with trembling fingers. "They were breaking in," she panted. "I heard them." "I know," the driver replied. "They were meant to find you." Her heart dropped. "Why?" "To scare you. To corner you." He turned the car onto a wider street, blending seamlessly with traffic. "To make sure when the investigation hits the media, you look unstable." Panicked. Guilty. Aubrey stared at the back of his head. "You're talking like you've seen this before." "I have." His eyes flicked to her through the rearview mirror. "With people like Grant Mercer, this is strategy, nothing personal." Nothing personal. She almost laughed. Everything about it felt personal. They drove through several blocks in silence until the car turned into the private drive of a sleek building overlooking the East River. The awning read, "The Denning Tower, Private Residences." The kind of place where people with secrets went to disappear. A doorman opened the side entrance for them without a word. Clearly, this was arranged. Inside, the building was silent except for the soft hum of hidden air vents and the faint click of Aubrey's boots across polished stone. The elevator ride felt endless, her nerves stretched thin. When the doors opened, the driver guided her into a penthouse with glass walls overlooking the city. It wasn't flashy, but elegant muted grays, clean lines, and warmth she hadn't felt in months. A coat was draped across the sofa, and a single file folder sat on the marble coffee table. Footsteps approached from the hallway. A man emerged. He was older, late 60s, maybe early 70s, with silver hair and eyes that held an unsettling mixture of authority and empathy. His suit was understated but expensive, his posture impossibly straight. He looked at her not with pity, but recognition. "Miss Lane," he said, his voice smooth and carefully measured. "I'm Sterling Caldwell." Aubrey froze. She knew the name. Everyone in Manhattan's financial world knew the name. Sterling Caldwell, one of the most influential investors in the country. A man who rarely appeared in public, a man whose net worth rumors varied by billions. "Why? Why would someone like you help me?" Aubrey asked, her voice barely audible. He studied her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "Because," he said, "your husband has made a grave mistake, and he doesn't understand who he's threatened." Aubrey swallowed hard. "What mistake?" Caldwell stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "He went after you." Her pulse hummered. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm no one." Something shifted in Caldwell's expression, something almost wounded. "No, Aubrey," he said softly. "You are not no one, and it's time you learn the truth about who you are and what you are entitled to." Aubrey's breath caught. "What truth?" Caldwell exhaled slowly, as if weighing the right moment to detonate a long-buried secret. But before he could speak, the driver rushed into the room. "Sir," he said urgently, "Mercer's men found the apartment. They're spreading out." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Then," he said, turning back to Aubrey, "we haven't a moment to waste." Aubrey Lane sat across from Sterling Caldwell, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles looked bleached. The penthouse around her hummed with a presence she couldn't see: security screens, encrypted systems, quiet conversations in adjacent rooms. She felt like she'd stepped into a world she was never meant to touch. Sterling stood near the window, looking down at the city lights with a posture that radiated command. "Aubrey," he began calmly, "what your husband has done is not impulsive. It is calculated, methodical, and extremely dangerous." Aubrey swallowed. "I know he framed me. But why? Why go so far?" Sterling turned to her, his eyes sharp. "Because Grant Mercer is drowning, financially, legally, and men like him don't go down alone." Before Aubrey could respond, the driver, whose name she learned was Rylan, entered the room with a laptop tucked under his arm and a thick binder in the other. "Sir, we pulled everything," Rylan said. "Emails, wire transfers, the shell companies, all of it." He set the binder in front of Aubrey. Her chest tightened at the sight of her own name stamped across the cover. Sterling Caldwell. Investigative report. Primary target of frame operation, Aubrey Lane Mercer. Aubrey hesitated before opening it. Her fingers trembled as she turned the first page, and her stomach dropped. There were documents she had never seen, authorizations supposedly signed by her, approving hundreds of thousands of dollars being funneled into a development fund. Her signature was perfect. Too perfect. "Forgeries," she whispered. "Professional ones," Sterling replied. "Grant didn't hire amateurs." Aubrey flipped to another section. It was worse. Emails she never sent. Transaction logs she never initiated. Passwords she didn't recognize. A digital footprint engineered with careful malice. "He's been planning this for months," she said softly. "Maybe longer." Sterling nodded. "The pattern suggests a 3-year strategy." Aubrey's head snapped up. 3 years? Rylan added. "Right around the time Mercer Tech started expanding, right when the money started moving." A cold realization seeped into Aubrey's bones. He married me before the company took off. Sterling finished her thought. Because he needed a shield, someone with a clean record, someone loyal, someone who wouldn't question sudden business trips or password changes. Aubrey's eyes burned with humiliation. "I was convenient. You were essential," Sterling corrected. "He built an empire on your stability." Aubrey closed the binder and leaned back, breath shaky. "If all this is true, then why help me? Why get involved?" Sterling's expression softened just slightly. "Because Grant Mercer has crossed lines he should never have crossed." And because Rylan burst back into the room before Sterling could finish. "Sir, we found something else." He placed a USB drive on the table. "It's the server log Mercer Tech tried to wipe last week. Someone leaked it to us anonymously." Sterling's brows lifted. "What does it contain?" Rylan took a breath. "A video." Aubrey froze. "Of what?" Rylan tapped the keyboard. A window opened. Grant's voice filled the room. "Just make sure it all lands under Aubrey's name. When the audit hits, she'll crumble. No one will question it. She's too soft for a courtroom." Aubrey felt like the floor shifted under her. The video showed Grant in his office, relaxed, confident, discussing the frame job with a financial officer she vaguely recognized. "Destroy everything," Grant ordered in the recording. "If she tries to fight back, we'll bury her." Aubrey covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. Sterling stepped behind her, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "Now you see," he said quietly, "why you cannot go back, why you must fight, and why you are no longer alone. Everyone." Aubrey wiped her eyes, fire beginning to replace fear. "What happens now?" Sterling's voice dropped to steel. "Now, Aubrey, we build the case that will destroy Grant Mercer." Aubrey Lane barely recognized herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't the exhausted, broken wife who had been kicked out of a penthouse and cornered into signing away her life. This woman stood taller, her eyes still rimmed with fatigue, held something sharper now. Fire, defiance. A promise she didn't yet know how to keep, but one she felt deep in her bones. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It began slowly, almost reluctantly, the way a wounded animal begins to stand again. The first morning, at Sterling Caldwell's private residence, Aubrey had woken up in a guest suite that overlooked the river. Sunlight spilled across crisp white sheets. For a moment, she forgot the chaos her life had become. Then the memories returned, hitting her chest like a tidal wave. Grant, the forged documents, the men breaking down her door, Her ruined reputation. The fear twisted her stomach, but something else pushed through it. A strange, quiet voice inside her. Enough. Sterling had arranged for someone to help her prepare for what was coming. A woman named Bianca Ward, a former corporate strategist turned crisis management expert. Sharp eyes, sharper instincts. Bianca didn't waste time with sympathy. "You want to win?" she said, tossing a sleek black folder onto the vanity. "Then, you need to stop looking like the version of yourself Grant broke." Aubrey blinked. "I don't care what I look like." "That's exactly the problem," Bianca replied. "Grant built a story. We're going to destroy it. And you can't do that dressed like you're apologizing for existing." The makeover wasn't about beauty. It was about reclaiming power. Her hair, once left in a loose, tired knot, was styled into soft waves that framed her face with deliberate confidence. Her posture, something Bianca corrected repeatedly, shifted from defensive to grounded. Clothing was chosen strategically. Tailored, professional, elegant without screaming wealth. "You need to walk into that courtroom the way he walks into every boardroom," Bianca said, "with a presence that makes people question everything they thought they knew." And 7 of it, in the story, Aubrey ran a hand over the fabric of the charcoal blazer Bianca had selected. It was nothing like the clothes she used to wear. This one fit like it understood her. Underneath it, she wore a cream silk blouse, simple but dignified. "I look like someone else," she murmured. "No," Bianca corrected. "You look like the woman you were never allowed to be." Downstairs, Rylan prepared a table full of evidence printouts, labeled binders, encrypted drives. Every piece was a brick in the fortress they were building. Sterling watched her with a mix of neutrality and something deeper, something almost protective. "You're doing well," Sterling told her. She forced a breath. "I still feel like I'm falling apart." "That's what falling apart looks like," he said, "before someone learns to fight." Later that evening, as she stood alone in the dim light of the penthouse hallway, Aubrey took a moment to steady herself. The city glowed beneath her like a field of stars. Somewhere out there, Grant believed she was broken, that she would crumble exactly the way he predicted. Aubrey placed a hand against the cool glass window. He didn't know her anymore. He never really had. She straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and breathed in. This was no longer about survival. This was preparation. For battle. For truth. For her life back. Downstairs, the elevator dinged a sound that sliced through the quiet. Bianca rushed toward her. "Aubrey," she said breathlessly, "you need to come to the conference room. Right now. We found something." Aubrey's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Bianca swallowed hard. "It's about your marriage, and it's worse than fraud." Grant Mercer thrived under pressure, the way most men thrived under praise. The bigger the risk, the deeper the lie, the wider he smiled. And on this particular morning, as he stepped into the gleaming lobby of Mercer Tech, he walked like a man invincible. His tailored navy suit fit him like armor. His shoes clicked across the marble floor with rehearsed confidence. Employees scrambled to stand straighter when he passed, not out of respect, but fear. Grant fed on that fear. It made him feel untouchable. Beside him, Chloe clung to his arm, her designer bag swinging with each step. She looked every bit the image Grant wanted to project. Young, beautiful, submissive, and naive enough to believe he would take care of her. She didn't see the calculating way he glanced at her, as though assessing which piece of furniture she'd be replaced with next. "Did you handle the PR?" Grant asked, not bothering to lower his voice. "Yes," Chloe said quickly. "The article about Aubrey is trending now. People are starting to speculate." "Good," he replied. "Fear makes her sloppy. Sloppy makes her predictable." Chloe hesitated. "But what if she—" Grant stopped walking so abruptly she almost collided with him. "What if she what?" he said, his tone sharp. Chloe swallowed. "What if she finds someone to help her?" Grant chuckled a low, humorless sound. "Aubrey couldn't help herself out of a paper bag. She's weak. She'll break exactly the way I want her to." He resumed walking, more smug than before. On the 42nd floor, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Senior executives whispered behind closed doors. Something was brewing, but Grant didn't care enough to ask. He strode in like a king, returning to his throne. "Gentlemen," he said, "shall we begin?" The head of legal, Martin Lowell, cleared his throat. "Grant, we received an anonymous tip last night about offshore transfers and your wife." Grant's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. "Ex-wife," he corrected. And she's irrelevant. Martin slid a manila folder across the table. This tip suggests she wasn't acting alone. It names a second person. Grant forced a laugh. Let me guess. Me? Martin didn't laugh back. Grant's expression hardened. Do I look worried? Aubrey is barely holding herself together. She can't find a lawyer who'll take her case, and she has no money to fight. A board member asked cautiously, but if she goes to investigators? She won't, Grant snapped. She's scared. She'll hide until the heat dies down. And by then, the transfers will be buried. He leaned back, stretching out confidently. She's exactly where I want her. But Chloe watched him with a flicker of unease. She replayed the way Aubrey had looked at the law firm, the shock, the confusion, the raw hurt. Something about it unsettled her. Aubrey hadn't looked defeated. She had looked betrayed. And betrayal, real betrayal, made people unpredictable. Meanwhile, Grant was oblivious to Chloe's thoughts. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and gave the room a final smirk. Gentlemen, don't worry. Aubrey Lane doesn't have the intelligence or resources to outplay me. By next week, she'll be nothing but a footnote in my life. He tapped the table twice. Meeting adjourned. As Grant stepped out, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting a message from legal or a board member. Instead, it was a private number. A single text appeared. You should be more careful about the enemies you create. Grant's jaw clenched. He typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Appeared again. Then a reply. The person who can end everything you built. Grant's stomach twisted, but he refused to show fear. He deleted the message. He straightened. Nothing could touch him. At least, that's what he believed. Because he had no idea who was protecting Aubrey now. Night in Manhattan wasn't quiet, not even at 2 in the morning. The city hummed the way a restless mind thinks constantly, deeply, never stopping. And inside Sterling Caldwell's penthouse, Aubrey Lane sat alone at the long marble conference table, surrounded by piles of documents, screenshots, timeline charts, and encrypted drives. Her eyes burned from reading. Her hands shook from exhaustion. But she couldn't stop. Tomorrow was the first hearing. And tomorrow could be the difference between clearing her name or losing everything forever. Bianca had gone to rest hours earlier. Rylan was downstairs running surveillance checks. Sterling had retreated to his private office to make strategic calls. But Aubrey stayed in the dim conference room with nothing but a cup of cold chamomile tea and the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Every page she turned felt like reliving her marriage lie by lie. Betrayal by betrayal. Grant had faked her signature. Grant had moved illegal funds under her name. Grant had told board members she was mentally unstable. Grant had tried to force her into hiding so she wouldn't testify. At some point, Aubrey pressed her palms over her eyes and exhaled shakily. How did I not see who he was? A voice answered from the doorway. Because people like Grant pick women who believe in love. Sterling stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of fresh tea. He placed one in front of her and sat across the table. You're still awake, he said. So are you, Aubrey replied. He smiled faintly. Touché. For a moment, they sat in silence. The room held a warmth unusual for a building made of glass and stone. A strange comfort settled between them, one Aubrey didn't entirely understand. Sterling leaned forward. Tell me the part that hurts the most. Aubrey swallowed. That I gave up pieces of myself for him, and he used every one of them against me. Sterling nodded gently. That's why tomorrow matters. It's not just legal, it's symbolic. Aubrey stared at the evidence spread across the table. What if I lose? What if the judge believes him? Sterling's expression hardened with something sharp anger, not at her, but for her. I have seen men like Grant crumble under the weight of their own arrogance, he said, and tomorrow he will face consequences he never imagined. Because for the first time, Sterling paused, letting his words settle. He won't be the most powerful man in the room. Aubrey felt something warm bloom in her chest, a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Hope. She looked back at the timeline chart. It traced each fraudulent transaction Grant had orchestrated. There was so much evidence, enough to sink a corporation, enough to bring in federal investigators. But something still bothered her. There's a gap, she whispered. Sterling raised a brow. Where? She pointed to a 3-month window from 2 years earlier. Grant started moving money before the company expansion, before the new investors, before the IPO talks. But why then? What was happening during that time? Rylan appeared suddenly in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Aubrey," he said, "you need to see this." He placed a printed email thread in her hands. The sender's name made her stomach twist. Chloe Devra. The email was addressed to Grant, and the subject line read, "Regarding the first transfer, she still has no idea." Aubrey's breath caught. Rylan whispered, "Grant didn't start framing you during the expansion. He started before your 5th wedding anniversary, 2 years before your marriage fell apart." Aubrey stared at the page as the truth sank in like ice. Grant hadn't framed her because he was desperate. He had framed her because he planned to replace her. Long before the first affair. Long before the first lie. Long before Chloe stepped into the picture. Sterling placed a steady hand on her arm. "Aubrey," he said quietly, "tomorrow isn't just about winning." She looked up, her eyes shining with something fierce. "It's about exposing the man he always was." And for the first time, Aubrey didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. The courthouse on Center Street loomed over the sidewalk like a stone giant, unmoving, cold, indifferent. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones raised, cameras flashing as though waiting for a star to arrive. But today, the spectacle wasn't for Hollywood. It was for Aubrey Lane Mercer, the woman the media already decided was guilty. "Aubrey, did you forge the transfers? Are you hiding from investigators? Why did your husband file for emergency protection orders?" Every shout was a blow. Bianca stepped in front of her like a shield, guiding her through the chaos. "Don't answer," she murmured. "Just walk, shoulders up." Aubrey lifted her chin, though her legs wobbled. She had traded her fear for resolve, but the attention still rattled her. It felt like thousands of eyes were tearing through her skin, searching for a crack in her armor. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Grant was already seated at the plaintiff's table, looking annoyingly composed. His navy suit, his polished cufflinks, his smug half-smile, he looked like a man convinced of his victory. Chloe sat behind him, wearing an expression far too confident for someone wrapped in criminal conspiracy. Aubrey's stomach twisted, but she kept her gaze forward. Sterling wasn't in the room yet, and a flicker of panic surged through her. Rylan seemed to sense it. "He'll be here," he whispered. "He's handling something." End quote. Bianca guided Aubrey to her seat at the defense table, opening a binder filled with evidence tabs. Grant's attorney, a silver-haired man named Joel Reddington, known for shredding reputations more efficiently than paper, stood and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the plaintiff requests that today's hearing focus on the financial misconduct allegedly committed by Mrs. Mercer. We believe she poses a flight risk and should be restricted from leaving the state." And 17, to the taster. A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. Grant's lips twitched upward. Reddington continued, "We have ample documentation showing unauthorized transfers executed under Mrs. Mercer's credentials." Aubrey clenched her jaw. Bianca rose, composed. "Your Honor, the defense will contest every piece of so-called evidence. We request the opportunity to present our counter-investigation." Judge Halvorson adjusted his glasses. "Where is your lead counsel?" Before Bianca could answer, the courtroom doors opened. A hush fell. Sterling Caldwell entered not with drama, but with a presence that silenced every whisper in the room. Men of his stature didn't usually step into courtrooms. They owned the buildings, not the benches. Sterling moved with quiet authority, stepping beside Aubrey like this had been his seat all along. Grant's smug expression flickered. "Just a second. Just enough." "Your Honor," Sterling said smoothly, "I am representing Mrs. Lane." The judge blinked. "Mr. Caldwell, you're personally taking this case?" "I am," he replied, "and I believe you will find the evidence submitted by the plaintiff not only fabricated, but criminal." Gasps echoed through the room. Grant shifted in his seat. Sterling placed a folder on the table. "Before we address anything further, the defense requests a full audit of Mercer Tech's development fund, including all offshore accounts." Reddington scoffed. "This is absurd." "You can't. I already obtained the warrants." Sterling handed documents to the bailiff. "Signed this morning." Grant's face drained of color. Aubrey felt her breath catch, not in fear, but in astonishment. Sterling hadn't come to defend her. He had come to dismantle Grant. Judge Halvorson skimmed the papers, eyebrows rising. "These are valid. Effective immediately, the audit will proceed. Reporters in the back frantically scribbled notes. Grant leaned forward, eyes burning. Aubrey, what did you do? For the first time, she met his gaze without flinching. I stopped being afraid. The judge rapped his gavel. We will reconvene after reviewing the submitted evidence. Court adjourned for the morning. In a rest. As people began to scatter, Sterling leaned toward Aubrey. This, he murmured, was only the opening move. Aubrey exhaled slowly, gripping the table to steady herself. Grant had no idea what was coming next. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind echoes of whispers and the rustle of legal papers. Aubrey Lane stayed seated for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. The morning session had been a shockwave, but Grant Mercer wasn't done, and neither was his attorney. When court resumed after the break, Grant walked back to the plaintiff's table transformed. The flicker of fear Sterling had caused earlier was gone, replaced by something colder: determination, rage, and a calculated plan to destroy her before she could even stand up. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering something with a tight jaw. Reddington nodded once, his lips curling into the kind of smile that made Aubrey's stomach twist. Judge Halvorson returned to his seat. Let's proceed. We're expended? Reddington rose immediately. Your Honor, before the defense attempts to deflect with baseless accusations, the plaintiff would like to present new evidence. Sterling didn't move. We'd like to review the materials. No need. Reddington cut in. This concerns Mrs. Lane's mental stability. A cold sweat broke across Aubrey's skin. Mental stability. Grant had used that phrase before. Reddington pulled out a thick file. We have medical reports, therapy notes, and witness statements demonstrating Mrs. Lane's emotional instability and volatile behavior during the marriage. Aubrey's heart plummeted. She had never been unstable. She had never hurt anyone. But she had been in marriage counseling alone, begging Grant to show up. He never did. Reddington flipped open the file dramatically. Your Honor, these notes describe episodes of hysteria, paranoia, and destructive outbursts. That's a lie. Aubrey burst out before she could stop herself. Reddington smirked. As you can see, exhibits A through D. Grant's expression shifted into a perfect mask of concern, the one he used in public. Aubrey, please, he said softly. No one wants to humiliate you. The performance made her stomach turn. Reddington continued. We have statements from 2 neighbors who claim Mrs. Lane frequently screamed, threw objects, and accused Mr. Mercer of imaginary crimes. If you take, I never. Aubrey tried to rise, but Bianca squeezed her arm, grounding her. Don't react, Bianca whispered. That's what they want. Reddington wasn't finished. Additionally, Mercer Tech's internal security officer filed a report 6 months ago describing Mrs. Lane as emotionally unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Aubrey shook her head, tears threatening. She remembered that day she had simply stopped by to bring Grant lunch. He'd refused to see her. Reddington slammed the final blow. We request a temporary restraining order to prevent Mrs. Lane from accessing any company, property, or contacting any Mercer Tech employees. Sterling stood, his voice sliced through the tension. Your Honor, this is fabricated character assassination. Reddington shot back, prove it. The judge looked conflicted. Aubrey felt the walls closing in. Everything Grant failed to prove with forged financial evidence, he was now trying to achieve with psychological warfare. Grant leaned back, folding his hands with quiet satisfaction. Aubrey has always struggled under pressure, he said gently, loud enough for the room to hear. She's fragile. Something inside her snapped. Fragile. He had used that word during every argument, every disagreement, every moment he twisted the blame onto her. Sterling placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but before he could speak, the doors of the courtroom slammed open. A woman stormed inside. Everyone turned. It was Grant's former executive assistant, Dana Skye, someone Aubrey hadn't seen in years. She marched straight to the front, clutching a folder. Your Honor, she said breathlessly, I have evidence relevant to this hearing. Grant's face drained of color. Reddington sputtered. Miss Skye, you were not. I was subpoenaed, Dana snapped. And Mr. Mercer paid me to stay quiet, but I won't. She placed the folder in front of the judge. Inside are recordings, emails, and internal memos, proving that Grant Mercer ordered staff to document fabricated incidents to make Aubrey look unstable. Gasps exploded across the courtroom. Grant stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous." Dana glared at him. "You told us? Word for word. If she looks crazy, the court will never believe her." "I shall." Aubrey's lips parted, her chest tight with shock. The judge opened the folder. His face darkened. Reddington looked like he'd swallowed glass. And for the first time in the entire marriage, Grant Mercer had no words. The courtroom was a powder keg, silent, volatile, ready to explode. Everyone stared at the folder Dana Sky had placed before the judge. Grant Mercer, once the immovable force in the room, now stood frozen, jaw clenched, eyes flicking desperately between Dana, the judge, and the exit. Aubrey Lane felt the air shift. Something had cracked. For the first time since the nightmare began, Grant didn't look untouchable. Judge Halverson cleared his throat and addressed Dana. "Miss Sky, you understand the legal consequences of submitting falsified information?" Dana lifted her chin. "Everything in that folder is real, Your Honor. I kept copies of everything because I knew what he was doing was wrong." Grant slammed his palm on the table. "She's lying. She was fired for incompetence." Dana snapped back. "I resigned because I refused to participate in destroying your wife." A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom. Judge Halverson opened the folder. The first page contained an internal memo with Grant's signature instructing staff to document emotional irregularities and create written incidents. Another page was a transcript of a recorded meeting where Grant was heard saying, "The more unstable she looks, the faster this goes through. Make it stick." Aubrey felt her throat close. Hearing his voice so casual, so cruel, filled her with a grief she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Grant's attorney struggled to recover. "Your Honor, these are taken out of context." But the judge wasn't listening. His expression hardened as he turned each page. Then something happened that froze everyone in place. The back doors of the courtroom opened, and Sterling Caldwell walked in. Not rushed, not frantic. He walked with the calm, deliberate gravity of a man used to choosing when the world would pay attention. Aubrey exhaled shakily. He came. Sterling approached the defense table and placed a thick black briefcase before the judge. "With the court's permission," he said smoothly, "the defense would like to add additional evidence. Evidence that confirms what Miss Sky has stated and exposes far more." Grant's face went pale. Judge Halvorsen nodded. "Proceed." Sterling opened the briefcase. Inside were organized files, USB drives, timestamps, and forensic audit reports, all stamped with federal insignias. "These documents," Sterling said, "contain confirmation from 3 independent forensic accountants that Mr. Mercer manipulated company funds, created shell entities, and directed illegal transfers under his wife's identity." Grant lurched to his feet. "This is ridiculous. How did you get any of that? Those files were sealed." Sterling didn't even look at him. "I requested a federal review last night," he said calmly. "Given the evidence already discovered, they granted emergency authorization." Gasps filled the courtroom. Grant's lips parted as he realized the truth. Sterling Caldwell had the power to trigger a federal audit overnight, and he had used that power for Aubrey. Bianca squeezed Aubrey's hand under the table, whispering, "This is it. This is where everything turns." Judge Halverson continued reading through the documents. His expression darkened further. "Mr. Mercer," he said, voice low and dangerous, "these are serious allegations, criminal in nature." Grant stumbled. "They're falsified. I'm being set up." Sterling finally looked directly at him. "No, Mr. Mercer," he said. "You set yourself up the moment you underestimated your wife." Aubrey felt something inside her, shift, something long buried, lifting its head. Strength. Not borrowed. Not given. Found. Grant tried one last attempt, pointing at Aubrey. "She's behind this. She's manipulating you all." Sterling cut him off. "Mrs. Lane hasn't touched a single document. I brought this to court. I made the calls. And if you want to challenge someone, challenge me." Grant's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in his life, he had no leverage. The judge set the papers down slowly. "This hearing," he said firmly, "is no longer about divorce. It is now a matter of potential criminal fraud." Grant's knees nearly buckled. Aubrey stared at him, not with fear, not with hatred, but with the calm understanding that the man who once held her life in his hands was finally losing control of his own. And this was only the beginning. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed. A quiet panic rippled through the gallery. The judge's expression shifted from irritation to alarm. And Grant Mercer, once the man who strutted in with full confidence, now looked like he was standing on thin, cracking ice. Sterling Caldwell, calm as a surgeon, placed a final folder on the judge's bench. "This," he said, "is the last piece of evidence the defense will present today. En personoff, to the masses, dedandost." Grant slammed his hands on the table. "Your Honor, we cannot accept illegally obtained." Sterling didn't even turn toward him. "Nothing here is illegal. Every document was obtained through federal authorization or subpoena." Judge Halvorson nodded. "Continue." Sterling opened the folder. Inside were color-coded charts and printed emails, each page stamped with the emblem of the U.S. Financial Crimes Bureau. He spoke with meticulous precision. "For the last 3 years, Mr. Mercer has conducted repeated illegal transfers, moving funds through offshore accounts in Luxembourg, the Cayman Islands, and Cyprus. Those accounts were created using Mrs. Lane's identity, social, digital signature, even her employment profile." He tapped a page. "This document shows a $6 million transfer executed under Mrs. Lane's credentials while she was hospitalized for an appendectomy." Soft gasps echoed across the room. Aubrey's fingers curled into fists. Grant stiffened, jaw clenched so tightly his cheek twitched. Sterling turned another page. "Here, Mr. Mercer instructs an employee to scrub metadata. In this one, he orders a subordinate to route funds through a shell company registered under Aubrey Lane Mercer's maiden name." He handed the page to the judge. "And this is the forensic audio recording." The judge gestured. "Play it." A USB drive was inserted into a speaker. The courtroom fell silent. Grant's voice crackled through. "If this blows up, she takes the fall. That's what she's there for. No one will question it. She's too scared to push back." Aubrey closed her eyes, pain slicing through her chest. Another voice responded in the recording. "And if she talks?" Grant laughed coldly. "She won't. She thinks I love her." A sharp inhale echoed through the room. Aubrey's. Her heart felt like it cracked clean in two. She had stayed up nights worrying about him, defended him, believed him. And he had been planning her destruction while she made him dinner. Judge Halvorson leaned back, face pale. "Mr. Mercer, do you deny this?" Grant's voice faltered. "Those recordings, they're edited. Deep fakes. This is an attack on my character." Sterling spoke sharply. "The recordings are certified authentic by the Bureau's Digital Forensics Division." He placed another document on the judge's desk. "And this," Sterling added, "is the investigator's certification." "I do, my." Reddington, Grant's attorney, shot to his feet. "Your Honor, even if these materials were legitimate," the judge cut him off. "Sit down, Mr. Reddington." A hush fell. Grant tried one last time, voice strained. "Aubrey, listen to me." Aubrey turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. Her voice was low, even, steady. "No more lies." Grant swallowed hard. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked cornered. Not angry, not arrogant. Cornered. Sterling stepped forward. "Your Honor, in light of the overwhelming evidence, the defense requests an immediate protective order for Mrs. Lane, the dismissal of all accusations filed by Mr. Mercer, and a recommendation for criminal investigation into his financial misconduct." Judge Halvorson didn't hesitate. "Granted on all counts." Aubrey exhaled, a shaky breath leaving her chest like years of pain finally breaking loose. Grant's face twisted, desperation replacing confidence. "You can't do this. You don't understand who I am." Sterling's reply was calm. "Deadly. We understand exactly who you are." Two federal agents entered the courtroom, then quiet, efficient, purposeful. When they approached Grant, he backed away. No, this isn't happening." He looked at Aubrey with eyes full of betrayal, as if she had wronged him, as if she had destroyed his life. But Aubrey didn't look away this time. She didn't tremble. She didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She simply watched as the man who tried to ruin her was finally collapsing under the weight of his own crimes. And the storm had just begun. The moment the federal agents placed their hands on Grant Mercer's arms, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters fumbled with cameras, attorneys shouted objections, and the gallery gasped like they were witnessing the fall of a celebrity. But through the noise, Aubrey Lane sat frozen, watching the man she once promised forever to come undone in a matter of seconds. Grant jerked away from the agents. "Don't touch me. I built this company. I built everything." His voice cracked with the desperation of a man finally seeing the edges of his empire crumble. Reddington, his attorney, tried to intervene. "Agents, there must be a misunderstanding. My client has not been inspected formally." One of the agents raised a hand. "Mr. Mercer is being taken into custody for questioning related to financial misconduct, fraud, and identity falsification. A federal warrant has been issued." Grant paled. "A federal? No, this is Caldwell. He arranged this." Sterling Caldwell remained seated, hands folded calmly. He didn't flinch at the accusation. He didn't even blink. His presence alone was enough to silence half the room. Grant lunged toward him. "You think you can destroy me? You think you can take everything I've worked for?" Another agent restrained him. "Sir, don't make this worse." Grant thrashed once more before finally stilling, chest heaving. His eyes found Aubrey wild, furious, betrayed. "You did this to me." Aubrey held his gaze. "You did this to yourself." Grant looked like he'd been slapped. For a moment, something almost human flickered in his expression. Shock, disbelief, the realization that she wasn't the woman he could manipulate anymore. Then that flicker hardened into hatred. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You think he's helping you? Caldwell doesn't care about you." Ryland stepped forward. "Watch your mouth," Grant sneered. "Oh, I know exactly what's happening. A billionaire takes pity on the sad, pathetic ex-wife, and suddenly she has power she never earned?" Aubrey rose slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. "I earned my freedom," she said quietly, "and you earned every consequence." Grant opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He had lost his script, his control, his narrative. The agents cuffed him. The metallic click echoed through the room like the final note of a requiem. As they escorted him out, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about fraud, offshore accounts, embezzlement. Grant kept shouting back, "It's fabricated. She's lying. They're all lying." But the world was no longer listening. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind him. Silence settled like dust. Aubrey's knees nearly buckled, but Bianca caught her arm. "It's okay. Breathe." "You did it." Aubrey nodded, tears stinging her eyes, not of sadness, but of release. Years of silent suffering finally had a voice. Years of manipulation finally had an end. Judge Halvorson cleared his throat. "The court will recess until further notice as federal authorities conduct their investigation. Mrs. Lane is free to leave. And Mrs. Skye." He paused. "Your testimony today was invaluable." Dana nodded humbly, glancing at Aubrey with an apologetic expression. Aubrey offered her a faint, grateful smile. As the courtroom emptied, Sterling approached Aubrey. For the first time, his eyes softened, fully open, honest. "You stood your ground," he said. "I knew you would." She exhaled shakily. "I didn't know I could." "That's because you never had the chance to." Aubrey looked up at him. "What happens now?" Sterling exchanged a glance with Rylan. "Now," he said with quiet gravity, "now the truth about your past needs to come out. You deserve to know why I stepped in. Long before today." Aubrey's heart pounded. "My past?" Sterling nodded. "It's time you learned what Grant never knew." The courthouse hallway had finally emptied out, leaving only the muted echo of distant footsteps. Aubrey Lane leaned against the cool marble wall, letting the reality of the day wash over her. Grant was gone, taken away in handcuffs. Her name was cleared. The weight she had carried for years finally felt lighter, almost unreal. Bianca nudged her shoulder gently. "You do realize you just took down a man who thought he was untouchable, right?" Aubrey gave a tired laugh. "I didn't take him down. Sterling did." "No," Bianca said firmly. Sterling opened the door. "You walked through it." Before Aubrey could respond, Sterling Caldwell approached, his expression unreadable. "Aubrey," he said quietly, "we need to talk. Privately." Rylan motioned them toward a side corridor, away from the reporters clamoring outside. As they walked, Aubrey's chest tightened with confusion. She had just survived the biggest battle of her life. Why did she feel like another one was waiting? Sterling opened a door to a private conference room. It overlooked the city, golden light spilling through tall windows. The room was quiet, almost sacred. He gestured for her to sit. Aubrey hesitated. "Sterling, what is this about?" He exhaled, lowering himself into the chair across from her. His eyes, usually sharp and controlled, held something softer now, something vulnerable. "It's time you heard the truth," he said. "Not about Grant, not about the case, about you." She frowned. "About me?" Ryland stood near the door but didn't speak. He looked tense, like he already knew what Sterling was about to reveal. Sterling folded his hands. "Aubrey, when you were 8 years old, you were placed into a temporary guardianship program after your mother passed." Aubrey stiffened. "Yes. My mother, she didn't have family. I was moved around a lot." "That's what you were told," Sterling said gently. "But it wasn't the full story." Aubrey blinked. "What do you mean?" Sterling reached into his briefcase and pulled out an old, worn envelope. He slid it across the table. Her name, Aubrey Lane, was written on it in faded ink. Her breath caught. "This was written by your mother," Sterling said. "To me." Aubrey's heart stuttered. "To you?" Sterling nodded slowly. "She and I knew each other years ago, long before you were born." Aubrey stared at him, unable to speak. He continued, voice quiet. "When your mother fell ill, she contacted me. She asked me to take care of you, to protect you. But at the time, I was in the middle of a dangerous financial takeover, one that put my entire life under scrutiny. I couldn't risk dragging a child into that world. So I arranged discreet guardianship until I could bring you into my care safely." This move the comment. Aubrey swallowed hard, her pulse racing. You were supposed to be my guardian?" Sterling nodded. "I have followed your life from a distance for 22 years. I ensured you received scholarships. I ensured you were placed in good homes. And when Grant Mercer began building an empire on your name, I stepped in." Her lungs constricted. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice softened. "Because I wanted you to build your life freely, not in someone's shadow, especially not mine. If you can't explain, and undo." Aubrey wiped at her eyes. "So you're saying, all this time, you've been watching over me?" "Protecting you," Sterling corrected. "As I promised your mother." Tears spilled over her lashes. Sterling leaned forward, his voice full of something she had never known from any father figure. "Aubrey, you are not alone. You never were." Her hand covered her mouth as a sob escaped, quiet but raw. Years of abandonment, years of believing she had no roots, no family, no history, suddenly unraveled. Sterling stood and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And the world will know the truth when you're ready. You are the legal heir to the Caldwell estate." Aubrey froze. Heir. To everything she never imagined she deserved. Her life had just changed again, this time not by cruelty, but by destiny. The following morning, Manhattan buzzed with a different kind of electricity. News alert banners scrolled across every major network. Tech CEO Grant Mercer faces federal investigation. Social media feeds erupted with theories, leaked documents, and grainy courtroom photos. By noon, reporters were camped outside Mercer Tech headquarters and the courthouse steps. But they weren't looking for Grant anymore. They were looking for Aubrey Lane. Inside a quiet conference room high above the noise, Aubrey stared at her reflection in the glass wall, no longer a ghost of a woman hiding behind fear. She looked older, steadier, and somehow freer. Bianca brushed lint from Aubrey's blazer. "Today is important," she said. "This press statement is your first step back into the world on your terms." Aubrey took a shaky breath. "I don't want to look vindictive." Bianca nodded. "You won't. You're not here to attack. You're here to reclaim your narrative." Ryland stepped in with Sterling close behind. Sterling carried a folder and an expression Aubrey couldn't quite read, somewhere between pride and solemn duty. "The press is ready," Ryland said. "We've coordinated your exit through the east doors. They'll have clear shots." Aubrey tensed. "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of attention." Sterling stepped closer. "You don't have to perform, Aubrey. Just speak. Truth is the strongest thing you have." She nodded, steadying herself. They walked through a private hallway leading to the courthouse balcony where the press conference would be held. As they approached the doors, the sound of reporters multiplied: shouts, clicking cameras, the chaotic hum of breaking news. Before stepping out, Sterling touched her arm gently. "One more thing," he said. Aubrey looked up. "What is it?" Sterling handed her a small, black envelope. Your mother left something else for you, something she wanted you to have when you were strong enough. Aubrey froze. Her fingers trembled as she held the envelope, but she didn't open it. Not yet. Later, she whispered. Sterling nodded, understanding. Bianca pushed the doors open. Flashbulbs erupted like fireworks. Aubrey stepped into the blinding light, shoulders squared, chin lifted. Reporters surged forward, microphones aimed like weapons. Mrs. Lane, did you know about the fraud? How do you feel about your husband's arrest? Do you plan to press charges? Do you plan to press charges? Is it true Sterling Caldwell is now representing you? Aubrey raised a hand, and the crowd fell surprisingly silent. Her voice carried across the courtyard, steady, clear. I want to say this plainly. I did not commit any of the crimes attributed to me. My husband acted alone, and I will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. Cameras clicked rapidly. She continued, for years, I believed supporting my husband meant sacrificing myself. I was wrong. And I hope every woman watching this knows your worth is not defined by someone else's success. Reporters murmured, impressed. But one question cut through the noise. Mrs. Lane, now that your name is cleared, what comes next for you? Aubrey hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because for the first time since she could remember, the answer was hers to choose. I'm rebuilding my life, she said softly, piece by piece, and I won't be doing it alone. Her eyes flicked briefly towards Sterling, who stood behind her like a quiet pillar. The cameras didn't miss it. The crowd erupted again, but Aubrey stepped back, letting security guide her inside. When the doors closed behind her, the silence returned. Bianca exhaled. You were perfect. Rylan grinned. They didn't see that coming. Sterling approached her slowly. Aubrey. She turned. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Something in her chest loosened, something she hadn't realized she'd been holding on to. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded toward the black envelope still in her hand. When you're ready, he said, that letter will answer the last question you've carried all your life. Aubrey looked down at it, fingers brushing the faded edges. For the first time in decades, she wasn't afraid of the truth. She was ready to walk toward it. The Caldwell estate overlooking the Hudson River glowed softly under the late afternoon sun. Its warm amber light poured across the manicured gardens, the stone pathways, and the quiet veranda where Aubrey Lane now stood, holding the black envelope her mother had left behind. The envelope felt almost weightless in her hands, yet somehow heavier than anything she had ever carried. Sterling waited a respectful distance away, hands clasped behind his back. He hadn't pushed her. He hadn't rushed her. He simply stood as steady as he had since the day he revealed the truth. Her guardian, her mother's last request, the silent protector who stepped from the shadows right when she needed him most. Aubrey inhaled sharply and opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter, written in her mother's soft, looping handwriting. My sweet Aubrey, if you are reading this, it means Sterling kept his promise. You may not know him yet, but he loved your father as a brother. And he will love you with the kind of honor the world rarely gives. You will grow strong, my little girl. Stronger than me, stronger than anyone expects. And when the moment comes that someone tries to break you, Sterling will be there. Walk toward your future, not your fear. I love you always. Mom? Aubrey pressed the letter to her chest, her eyes stinging as tears slid silently down her cheeks. Tears not of sorrow, but release. Her mother had never abandoned her. Her mother had protected her the only way she could. And Sterling was the bridge her mother had left behind. After a moment, Aubrey turned, wiping her cheeks. Sterling stepped closer, concern flickering across his face. Are you all right? He asked softly. Aubrey nodded. More than all right. She held out the letter. She trusted you. Sterling's expression tightened, grief, gratitude, and something deeper passing through his eyes. I made a promise. And you kept it, Aubrey whispered. They stood silently for a moment, the sun slipping lower across the river. Then Sterling spoke, voice gentle but resolute. Aubrey, the Caldwell estate, the holdings, the trusts, they're yours now. She intended it from the beginning. The words landed softly, but powerfully. Aubrey didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt grounded. I don't want it because it's wealthy, she said. I want it because it's my mother's legacy, and because it's finally time I build something of my own. And once calm, Sterling smiled, warm, proud. And you will. On your terms. Aubrey breathed in the river breeze, feeling its coolness sweep through her hair. For the first time in years, she felt free. Not running, not surviving, living. Behind them, Rylan and Bianca stepped onto the veranda. Bianca grinned. So, our girl ready to face the world again? Aubrey laughed softly. Yes, I think I am. Rylan lifted a tablet. The federal investigation is underway. Grant's assets are frozen. Mercer Tech's board is cooperating, and from the look of it, Grant's legal team is falling apart. Aubrey didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. But inside, she felt the profound satisfaction of justice. Not revenge. Justice. Bianca elbowed her gently. You know, most people never get to see karma work this cleanly. Aubrey smiled faintly. I didn't need revenge. I just needed truth. Sterling stepped closer, his voice low. And truth has set you free. Thank you. A hummingbird hovered near the veranda railing, its wings shimmering in the light. Aubrey watched it flit away, leaving a tiny trail of stillness behind. She turned to Sterling. What happens now? He met her gaze steadily. Whatever you choose, you have family, you have a future, you have a name that stands on its own. Aubrey felt her chest swell with a warmth she'd never known. I think, she said slowly, I want to build something that matters. Something my mother would be proud of. Something I can be proud of. Sterling's voice softened to a near whisper. Then I'll stand beside you, every step. Aubrey looked out over the river, golden, endless, open. Her old life had burned, but from the ashes, something stronger rose. This wasn't survival. This wasn't revenge. This was beginning. Aubrey Lane Caldwell walked forward toward the sun, toward her future, toward everything she finally realized she deserved. So, that's it, my wonderful friends. Our story comes to a close. And if you're still here, right now, listening to these last words, then something in this journey touched your heart in a way only real life can. Maybe it reminded you of your own quiet battles. Maybe it made you feel seen. Or maybe, just maybe, it showed you that no matter how dark things get, there is always a path back to yourself. You know, Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." And Aubrey's story proves exactly that. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the humiliation, none of it was the end. It was the beginning of a stronger, clearer, more grounded life. A life where she learned to walk with her head held high, not because she won, but because she healed. And that's something each of us can carry into our own days. That even when someone tries to break you, you still have the final say in who you become afterward. If this story gave you strength today, if it made you think, or if it simply made you feel less alone, then don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel. Your presence here matters more than you know.